Bun venit la Worksounds, un podcast despre muncă și HR, despre transformare și viitor, despre agilitate și progres. Worksounds este realizat de BusinessMark, o companie de organizare evenimente business ce crede în puterea schimbului de idei și a conversațiilor autentice între profesioniști.
Hello everyone and welcome to Worksounds. I'm Oana Scarlat, I'm a General Manager at EXEC-EDU, the training company, and I'm very happy to be the host of this very special event. We are recording from Radisson Blu Hotel from BusinessMark event HR Uncovered, and I have here beside me a very special guest from London. We are talking about Zara Whysall. Hello, Zara,
Hi.
and
Nice to be
welcome to Romania. Are you for the first time here in Romania?
First time. Yeah. And
Great.
so far the conference room is great.
Excellent. Zara is a chartered psychologist. She's a business psychologist working in Nottingham Business School from Nottingham Trent University in UK, and she comes with a very extensive experience in organizational culture and employee well-being. And she was here today presenting us a very interesting report that we will have the privilege to find out more in this episode. So welcome again, Zara. And if you want to complete something that I said about your experience, you're welcome to do it.
No, it was perfect. Thank you very much. Absolutely great.
Okay, so today we go from a poster of values on the walls to very concrete behaviors in terms of organizational culture, because as you have said in the event, company is not what we have on the wall, isn't it? And I would ask the first question about the report that you talked about in today's conference. And this highlights a significant gap between what companies say their values are and how employees actually behave. So, in your opinion, what are the most common reasons that this gap exists?
Thank you. So I've been talking about what I call cultural misalignment, that gap that you referred to, which could be a gap between our espoused values and, the real culture. And I think it's common, not necessarily it's intentional, it's accidental, because it's very hard to create alignment. I think the drivers that bring it about are because, for instance, organizations are all having to compete quite hard to attract talent. And so we have to create our employee value proposition very carefully, and say wonderful things about our company to attract people naturally. But then perhaps, it's very hard to live up to those quite high standards, and the reality might not be this ideal picture that we paint to try to attract people in. Or it might be also, for external stakeholders, we are also trying to paint a picture of our company for our customers or investors or, other external stakeholders. And, sometimes it might be that we're aspiring to be those things. If we say that we're a really innovative company, inclusive, we probably, many of them want to be that. But as we know, probably as HR and learning and development professionals, that it's very hard to sometimes create the change and embed the behaviors that make that a reality. So I think there's lots of understandable reasons why that gap comes about. And it's a challenge that many companies are facing. Complex issue.
It's very insightful what you've said about this gap, and of course that we are looking to the ideal culture. And the ideal culture, it doesn't resemble very well sometimes with the actual culture that you said at the conference. That can you tell us again what you said at the conference that culture is?
Yes, good point. So I think I like the informal definition that
exactly.
Culture is how we do things around here.
Exactly.
There's lots of academic definitions which are much longer or more complicated, but the key things are that it is a shared understanding amongst the majority or many people across an organization about how we do things. And that will be different to in, the next company, how you do things, how you operate. It could be processes, but it could just also be how we are informally. Do we make jokes? Are we casual? How do we dress? It's the informal rules of how we do things in this company, and it's informed by all sorts of other things, the policies, the formal stuff, the informal things, beliefs and values that employees bring, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, how we do things around here is a really good
things around here. Thank you so much, Zara, for these highlights. And this passes to the next question, because I liked very, very much what Peter Drucker said, and I saw also in your report, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I know it from a very long time ago. So based on your findings, how can you tell if a company's culture is working for or against the strategy goal?
That is also a really great question, isn't it? And I think it will come about in different ways. I think one of them might be that you have a strategy and some goals associated with that strategy. As I've said, it might be to become more innovative. It might be to have the highest quality products in your market or whatever it is. And you might be trying to put all of the right things in place, you think. You've communicated this strategy. Why is it not happening? And it might just feel very hard. So in terms of the results, you might just be thinking, why are we not getting the results that we want? We've asked people to be innovative. Why are we not seeing it? And I think if you peel back the layers and look under the surface, and then you will see aspects of culture that explain it. We want people to be innovative, but we don't give them the time to be innovative, or we are quite harsh when people make mistakes, which are quite natural if we're trying to be innovative. So I think one of the ways that you'd see it is in the results, I think, and then also you'd start looking at the behaviors. So I think you'd see it in the results. They're what you might call the leading indicators. We will see the lagging indicators, but the behaviors that I was just going to talk about are better to look at because they're the leading indicators. So before we see the impact on our results, our bottom line, our revenue, whatever it may be, even our employee turnover, before that, if we look at the culture, then we should get an idea as to those leading indicators. Okay, we want people, let's say, to be inclusive, because we know that that's what people care about. But then we're not seeing it, and people are leaving because they are saying they don't feel included. If we look at the behaviors, then we might see, our leaders aren't really being inclusive in how they're leading. And so hopefully I think you'd see that gap in those two ways, on your results, but also in the behaviors, that you need to know which behaviors are likely to lead to which sorts of outcomes. So, for many HR people, that's quite common territory, isn't it? Looking at competencies and that sort of thing. But yeah, a really good question. How would you know if your culture is not supporting the strategy and vice versa?
And now, Zara, we arrive to the leader. So the report notes that a leader action can be a major barrier to the healthy culture. So from your perspective, what is the single most important thing a leader should never do if they want to build trust and sustain a supportive culture?
You're right. Leaders are really important because they're so visible, and because they make decisions, right? And I think in terms of trust, the one thing that a leader shouldn't do if they want to build trust would be to do with dishonesty. That would be my suggestion. So I think as soon as a leader, as employees sense a leader has been dishonest about something, that trust is lost. And I don't necessarily mean a blatant lie. It could just be not being as transparent as they could be, hiding some truths from people. So I think transparency is really important. And it's the same with the gap in culture, between what we're espousing and where we really are. I think for leaders to acknowledge and be honest about, we really want to be here. We know that we're not yet, perhaps. We know that we've got work to do, but we'll get there. And I think that sort of thing will build trust much better than pretending we are this wonderful, imperfect company and everybody thinking, I'm not sure we are. And so you lose that trust. So, but yeah, you're right, that trust is very important for leaders if we're going to follow them, if we're going to try to work hard at implementing their strategies. And,
so honesty, transparency. May I add also consequence? To be consequent in your actions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I think about behavior and what influences behavior, I look at cues and consequences as two key things. So a cue is like role modeling. So what do we see the leaders doing? Do we see them behaving in the way that they're asking us to behave? But the consequences, you're quite right, are equally important. So if I don't behave in that way, does anything happen or not? If it doesn't, then I'd probably do it again, right? For instance, if you're an organization saying we want to have the highest quality products, and then employees are, not very careful, let's say in production areas, they're not very careful, they're just trying to make things as quickly as possible and then leave. Then if the leaders overlook that, they're not reinforcing the fact that quality is important, and it will send the message to the employees, won't it? Well, it's okay. Like, okay, quality is actually fine. We're just saying that we want, high quality, but actually it's not true. So I'll carry on behaving in this way. So yeah, that consistency between what I say and do and reinforce, really important. Yeah, good point.
Excellent example. Thank you. We are going now to the well-being part. So many companies have well-being programs, but it doesn't always translate to a culture of well-being. What is the role of the HR professionals in moving from a program-based approach to a truly integrated culture of well-being?
Yeah, well, it's an important point that you made about what's the HR's role. And I think it's important to recognize, and somebody said it at the conference earlier, that culture is not just HR's responsibility, and they can't single-handedly change the culture. So HR, we can do certain things, but to go beyond sort of one-off initiatives and to make a culture of well-being, it needs to be in the day-to-day, doesn't it? It needs to, back to the definition, it needs to become how we do things around here. So yes, as HR can do certain things, they can put on initiatives, and some of that might have an impact. But to get it into the day-to-day, we need to look at things like, how do managers manage day-to-day? What are the conversations like that they have? Do they inquire about employees' well-being? Do they manage in a way that gives people all of the things that we know are important, like control, reasonable workload? Do they manage change well? So some of that might come down to training. So obviously a key responsibility for HR is to make sure that they're trained in a way that would enable them to do those things. But then I think it's also HR emphasizing that this needs to be done day in, day out. This needs to become how we do things. So thinking of ways to reinforce that as well, which might come back to how we reward people as well. We might look at how we incentivize, who we promote, the types of qualities we look for in recruitment. So all of our systems as well, but the key is to try and get it into the day-to-day. So shift from thinking about initiatives. They're nice, but the important thing is day-to-day. How do I get this into how people manage day-to-day, how people act day-to-day, how people in our organization treat people day-to-day? And it could be, conversations. Perhaps HR, could be well placed to put in some initiatives that support good conversations day to day. So it might be an initiative, but hopefully it feeds into the day to day, because we have conversations every day, don't we? What I discourage is, the fruit bowls and the yoga. It's nice, but it won't create a culture of well-being.
There's a lot of value and information in what you have said. And I think I would add that also the direct manager has a very, very important role along with HR, because he's also a people manager. And he's staying day by day near his colleagues.
Absolutely. It's a hard job, isn't it? Being a manager, especially middle level management.
Exactly.
So I think for HR, we do have, HR has a responsibility to make sure they're well supported and trained and also to think about what the senior leadership is asking of them in terms of targets or deliverables, because if that's not very easily achievable in a way that supports well-being in this context, then we're asking them to be kind and lovely and supportive to employees, manage their well-being, but also achieve these really difficult deliverables. And that places them in a very difficult situation. So I think we also need to look at what are we asking of managers. But yeah, it's a very tough job. So lots of sympathy and support.
Exactly my point. Yeah. So for a company that wants to intentionally transform its culture to bridge that gap, where should they even begin? What are the top 3 pieces of advice that you would offer to a company that starts now to transform the culture?
And lots are. I think we saw some data to suggest that many organizations, especially in Romania, but also it showed up in my UK data, are wanting to change their culture. So it's a good question where to start. I think the biggest downfall or pitfall in engaging in a culture transformation is starting without a clear idea of the destination. What type of culture are we trying to create? And I don't just mean in terms of values. You know, we want an inclusive culture. Well, that's great, but what does it look like in terms of behaviors? If we've just said that culture is how we do things around here, if we value inclusion or innovation or whatever it may be, what does that actually look like in behavioral terms? How would we be doing things differently? So think very tangible practices. What would need to change? So firstly, be clear on the destination. Where are we actually trying to get to? And ideally have a way of measuring that, because otherwise we'll never know if we've got there. And then understand, a bit like it with a competency framework would sort of codify leadership behaviors, for instance, codify that in terms of cultural behaviors. What would be the key behaviors that we need to see? And then look at what have we got currently? You know, it might be how decisions are made, for instance, or it might be, in the case of innovation, how do we handle mistakes? If you want innovation, people need to take risks. So how do we handle mistakes when that happens? And you might then have we need to move from telling people off and making them feel really bad or firing them to accepting that it's a really great learning point and all of those sorts of things, like psychological safety. So where's the destination? What does it look like in terms of behaviors? And then trying to move, what do we need to move from and to in terms of practices in our organization? And then just being persistent. So as we all know, changing behaviors, which is what a lot of it comes down to, we'll come to systems in a moment, changing behaviors is hard. And if we're not careful, especially with culture, they're like habits, it will revert back. So we need to keep reinforcing it, reminding people, you know, I would also emphasize not top-down approach to culture transformation. It needs to be bottom-up. So you can't mandate culture. We can't tell people, create a culture of whatever. So we need to have, people involved, people from throughout the organization involved, whether that's through communities of practice or having culture champions or steering groups from all different pockets working on changes, then that's great. But yeah, the reinforcement is important, which the final point comes to looking at systems as well. So we might try to promote a change of behavior here. So it might be, let's say we want people to be more collaborative, but then we remember if we look at our systems, we're rewarding people on individual goals. So they're going to look after number one before they start being collaborative, because that's what we're driving because of how we're rewarding people or measuring people. So make sure the systems are aligned. So there's a lot. Yeah. It's not easy. But start with some, I'd say, small practices that you think are really critical to those outcomes that you want to achieve.
Yeah, I hope that people that are watching us have taken notes.
And, well, they can download the white book, white paper.
I loved your examples because I see that you are a psychology professor, but I see also that you have a lot of business experience, and I loved your examples, real life examples from companies.
We have to put it into real terms, don't we, to make it understandable. But people can download the ebook. It's free if they want more information on any of that.
Great, and let's give them this resource also. A last question, and I would kindly ask you to answer very shortly because we ran out of time. So what do you see as the biggest challenge in the next 5 years in sustaining a stronger culture?
Okay, so I think we all know that in the next 5 years, change is going to increase in pace, as we already feel that everything changes all the time. So I think it's creating a culture that's agile and a learning culture. So at organizational level, learning. So when things change, when the regulations in our country change, or when a new piece of AI comes in, we need to change. So that it means we need to learn. So I think it means things like embedding in more reflection, more feedback, more thinking about how we're doing things and whether they're the right way, and looking outside as well, outside of our organizations at what's going on. So I would say for the next 5 years, aspects of a learning culture would be really key.
Thank you so much, Zara, for these excellent insights. And we are so glad to have you here at BusinessMark. And thank you, BusinessMark, for bringing us the opportunity to meet Zara and to listen to her talk. And we hope to see each other soon in Romania in the next session.
Definitely. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Mulțumim că ați ascultat Worksounds, un podcast BusinessMark.